Well, good evening, everyone. As you know, we begin every council meeting with a First Peoples recognition statement that honors the Indigenous ancestry of the lands in which our city is based and speaks of reconciliation and coming together of Indigenous and non-Indigenous residents working together, building our community together for the benefit of everyone. But before I read this statement tonight, in the spirit of reconciliation that we have committed to as a council and as a community, it's important to acknowledge the terrible discovery of the bodies of 215 Indigenous children at a former residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia. We mourn this loss together with the Indigenous community. We also recognize that there were many other children who were victims of the residential school system. So as we mark the beginning of National Indigenous Peoples Month here in Kingston, we stand with all those who have suffered from the terrible legacy of residential schools, both families and community members alike. I know that I speak for all of council when I say that we remain committed to a path of meaningful reconciliation with both substantive actions and full and open discussion and learning from our history. There remains much work to be done, but we are committed to that work. Our hearts go out to all who have been impacted by this terrible discovery in Kamloops and by the broader legacy of residential schools. So with that, Sego, Ani, Buju, Ndio, Wachaya, Kwekwe. As the mayor of the city of Kingston, I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. Let us bring our good minds and hearts together as one to honor and celebrate these traditional lands as a gathering place of the original peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. It is with deep humility that we acknowledge and offer our gratitude for their contribution to this community, having respect for all as we share this space now and walk side by side into the future. So with that as a call to order, Madam Deputy Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, Mayor Patterson, we have a quorum. And at this time, I would like to confirm the participants for tonight's meeting. All members of council are present with the exception of Councillor Chappelle. We have 3 delegations: Robert Wickwich with respect to the Indigenous Housing Project, Mark Garnis with respect to new motion number 1, Donald Mitchell with respect to the Indigenous Housing Project. We will be receiving a briefing from Darius Smalley with respect to the asset management planning. And the following members of staff are present: Lanny Hurdle, Chief Administrative Officer; Paige Agnew, Commissioner of Community Services; Brad Joyce, Commissioner of Corporate Services; Desiree Kennedy, CFO and City Treasurer; Sean Armstrong, Fire Chief; John Bolognone, City Clerk; Jennifer Campbell, Director of Heritage Services; Craig Desjardins, Director, Office of Strategy, Innovation and Partnership; Brent Towler, Director, Corporate Asset Management and Fleet; Ruth Nordegraff, Director of Housing and Social Services; Tim Park, Director of Planning Services; Ian Semple, Director of Transportation Services; myself, Janet James, Deputy City Clerk; Blair Johnson, Corporate Records and Information Officer; and Jeffrey Walker, Manager, Taxation and Revenue.
Okay, thank you very much. So we were meeting in Committee of the Whole closed meeting. Earlier, we discussed 2 items with respect to succession planning program and then also LPAT appeals for the Williamsville Main Street study appeal and also new appeal on 7 residential units and maximum bedroom provisions. So I will ask for a motion to rise without reporting, please.
Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that council rise from the Committee of the Whole closed meeting without reporting.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, next we have the approval of our addits. We have an additional delegation. We have an additional motion of congratulations. We have 2 items of miscellaneous business and some communications. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the addits, please? Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Kiley. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, are there any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Councillor Stroud.
Do I actually declare that for the Committee of the Whole? Okay, thank you. Council meeting, Committee of the Whole, June 1st, 21. I, Gary Ostroff of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Committee of the Whole report number 21-156, as I have a professional relationship with this company making the appeal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other declarations of conflict of interest, we will move on. We have no presentations this evening, but we do have 3 delegations. The first delegation is Robert Ridridge, Communications Director of TP Mosa, who will appear before Council to speak to Clause 2 of Report Number 54 received from the CAO with respect to 113 Lower Union Street Indigenous Supportive Housing Project. Just a reminder to all of our delegations tonight that you have 5 minutes to speak, and then we will open it up to any questions from Council. So with that, Mr. Ridridge, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Ane, bonjour, hi, welcome. My name is Robert. I'm a member of the Gataragwe community, or Cataraqui Indigenous community here. I'm also the Communications Director at TP Mosa Iron Homes, a local Indigenous housing service provider. TP Mosa has been a valued partner of the City of Kingston for many years. Over those years, our partnership has grown significantly. Gratitude and appreciation may be given to many community members, both mainstream and Indigenous alike, for that growth. These individuals shared similar visions of creating a level playing field within societal inequalities. Today, it's understood by many that the value of TP Mosa brings to the table is unique. Normally, when you think the term support, one may reflect upon things like physical support, emotional support, perhaps mental health support through case management interventions and various community resources. TP Mosa brings Indigenous culture, spiritual values, and traditional ways of knowing and being is brought to the table. You are aware of the atrocities that occurred in the past. It was spoke about earlier, reservations, residential schools, etc. Our thoughts and our prayers go out to the 215 Indigenous children and their families and their descendants. Think of each of these events like a rock that has been dropped into the water. The water represents the lives of Indigenous people. Each rock has made an impression, either directly or indirectly, on Indigenous well-being over time. Each ripple within the water created by that rock represents the impact on Indigenous families over the past 150 years, or 7 generations. Although that rock has sunk to the bottom of the floor of the waterbed, the ripples on the surface of the water remain. The impact looks different than the original disturbance, but it's still present. Today, we identify such societal issues as cultural disconnect, fragmented families, harsh experiences of poverty and homelessness, to name a few only. This is the outcome experienced by many individuals in our Indigenous community. I believe it's everyone's responsibility to reconcile those atrocities of the past. Providing a home, a sense of security, and Indigenous ways of knowing and being will bring back that sense of identity to our community members. Once a sense of identity and self-worth is present, that individual has the ability to explore a brand new world from a stable foundation filled with traditional values and that sense of overall well-being and balance. Only then may they have the tools that they truly need to achieve their own vision for the future. Now, throughout my lifetime, I've seen many individuals who have experienced such hardship and struggle. They created change for themselves and their families because they were provided an opportunity just like this. Their descendants embraced that resiliency. Those descendants were given the opportunity to break cycles of intergenerational trauma, as we've spoke about today, so they did. That is why this relationship, this service, this decision that you're about to make is so important. We're not only affecting 19 individuals throughout the year. In fact, we're influencing the next 7 generations of Indigenous families in our community, reconciling the past and creating balance once again within the water. Miigwech, thank you for taking the time to listen and reflect upon the words mentioned here today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Ritledge, for your presentation and your very meaningful words, and my condolence to all who were impacted by the discovery this past week. I just wonder if you could share with us a little bit about the actual location of this property and what your thoughts are. Is it, do you see a real benefit of having it so, you know, in the middle of the city instead of, you know, in a suburb or far away?
Yes, for sure. There's an abundance of benefit, if I could describe it that way, in terms of 113 Lower Union Street. That's where all the action happens. That's where the highest need is. That's where the individuals congregate because the services are within walking distance. In terms of support and Indigenous supports within the local community, there are very few, unfortunately. This addition will create that opportunity, like I was mentioning, and it's physically located in the perfect spot. Thank you, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions then. I'm sorry. Councillor Holland, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And yes, thank you, Mr. Ritledge, for being with us and for, you always do a wonderful job in helping us understand some of the issues that Indigenous people have faced. Certainly here in the Kingston community, and your work on housing has been, has led to this point in a large part. So thank you for all of that. I just had a quick question regarding the proposed hours of support as part of this project that would be offered to the city, and just wanted to know if you could provide some information on that, what you think that will look like. I guess from your perspective, at least, I know that city staff would have maybe, I know that that you've had those conversations already, so just what you can provide in terms of what that would be.
Those 20 hours will largely be based on an understanding, educating in terms of history events, you know, Indigenous social history factors that we've meant, the ripple effect that has been experienced afterwards. But it's going to be a lot more fun as well. By fun, I mean real hands-on experience in terms of participating perhaps in ceremony in the future. There's many areas in which we conduct that after the pandemic, of course. You know, many areas in which we can, you know, get a hands-on approach, like I had mentioned, to those traditions, ceremonies, and teachings, so that people are able to relate in a better way, and it has such an impact that they will remember when they're making decisions. You know, perhaps be influenced by an Indigenous perspective when making those decisions in the future.
Excellent, thank you.
Great. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much, Mr. Ritledge. Yes, a point of order. Councillor Kiley.
Mayor Patterson, through you to you. Councillor Stroud has his hand up. I think it gets washed out because of the light behind him, but his hand was up.
Thank you. Councillor Stroud, I was not ignoring you. You're a little bit difficult to see on my screen. So go ahead, Councillor Stroud.
Thanks, Your Worship. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Sego. Hello, Mr. Ritledge, and thank you for coming to speak to us. I'm just learning a little about your organization, so maybe for the benefit of all of us, you could just say a little bit more about where you're, the recent history of the way you've helped with supportive housing, and the challenges, and you know, a little bit more about what this new location would offer as an additional means of support.
Okay, if I can break that down, that was a good question. A lot of stuff put into one. If I could break that down, TP Mosa has a history of providing cultural oriented support to all of our members within the community. We currently facilitate or run a number amount of rent geared to income properties, some affordable properties as well. We provide support such as cultural celebrations, different traditional teachings and ceremonies. Sometimes we have Indigenous elders or traditional people come in to help us along or guide us towards different activities that we do, both as a board of director and with the organization, with our tenants and clients themselves. How will this benefit? This additional 19 did I get that correct? 25% of the individuals who are homeless within Kingston area right now identify as Indigenous. We didn't have those numbers maybe 5 years ago because they weren't taken. The data suggests, the numbers suggest the people are out there and the need is high, proportionate. It's in proportionate to the 8% that of Indigenous people that we have in the Gataragwe area. So, providing those housing services that specific to cultural support, like I said, will bring that identity back, will create those opportunities so that they can build upon that foundation to change the cycles that they've experienced throughout their own lives. It has the opportunity, it has 19 spaces, physical spaces, but it has the opportunity to influence so much more, even within a year, a time frame of a year. So many more individuals and so many more people that surround those individuals. So the ripple effect will be positive in terms of implementing this particular collaboration.
Thank you. And if I could just ask a follow-up, Your Worship. So from your answer and from what you said at the beginning, it sounds like it's not only a supportive housing situation with the units at 113 Lower Union, there's also the cultural aspect, which is very important as a means of support, because with that Indigenous cultural environment, you will see those who are homeless and have, are dealing with things to do with their identity, with their Indigenous status, and how they fit in or don't fit in a city like Kingston. That is all extra support, I guess, with Tipimoza that you might not get from a different agency. Is that correct?
That's definitely correct. That's the unique aspect. And I believe, and I've seen time and time again throughout my other full-time position working with Indigenous offenders, I've seen time and time again that once you bring that identity in, something clicks and people change and lives change. So yes, that uniqueness that Tipimoza brings, that is the crucial aspect to this collaboration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So if there are no other questions, thank you very much, Mr. Whitwidge. And with that, we will move to our second delegation tonight. We'll invite Mark Garnis to appear before council, who will speak to new motion number 1 with respect to public notice boards. Mr. Garnis.
Start my video.
There we go.
Hi.
And you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, City Council. My name's Mark Garnis. I'm the director of the Kingston Canadian Film Festival, and I'm also co-owner of KPP Concerts. We present live music across Kingston, including lots of little shows at the pubs downtown, all the way to some of the famous bands playing at the Leon Center. I believe I sent you all an email a couple weeks ago. So thanks for giving me a few minutes today to speak with respect to the motion regarding public notice boards. So when the poster board was removed outside the Tourism Kingston office, I was really surprised by the reaction within the art scene. Several petitions seemed to pop up really quick. It got hundreds of signatures. I saw Sarah Harmer's name on there and a bunch of other famous people about town. I likely received 15 or 20 emails myself from folks in both the film and music scenes, just encouraging me to help support however I could. So it became clear that the removal of the old poster board outside the tourism office was not really the issue at all. Its removal highlighted the lack of public space in general throughout Kingston. So I have lots of input and responses I could share more thoroughly maybe at a later date, but the real concern from the independent artists and organizations is that the public notice boards are an extremely important way to promote their work. And in some cases, it's actually the only way that they get to promote their work, maybe outside their personal social media accounts or something like that. So, I mean, displaying a poster is inexpensive. It doesn't require a unique skill set or knowledge of social media ads or anything like that. And there's a good percentage of people that actually still find out about events through printed materials. I know our film festival did a survey a few years ago, and I was surprised that 20% of our audience actually found out about KCFF through printed materials, which is a lot higher than I thought. And we have a pretty good marketing budget and digital presence. So I suspect the percentage is much higher for organizations or people that don't have much budget for marketing at all. In the email that I sent, I also noted that tourists and visitors look to public notice boards as a way to discover independent art scenes that may not appear in some of the tourism magazines or paid advertising. These public boards are often discovered unintentionally when people are walking around, especially in the downtown core, going out to dinner and things like that. And I think I mentioned in my email my personal experience in Glasgow. When I was over there for the film festival, I actually found out about their amazing music scene just due to events posted on public boards that I would have never found out about. So, I mean, the Leon Center downtown, if we have Neil Young or some band playing there, it would be great if people coming downtown could find out about events happening at the Grad Club or the Toucan or the Mansion or some of these small gems in Kingston that are sometimes overlooked. I know when we have tourists here for the film festival, it'd be great to show them Reel Out, Modern Fuel, and Skeleton Park, and some of these awesome festivals that sometimes go unseen by visitors. So I don't know, maybe this sounds like hometown bias a little bit, but the art scene here is strong. And I do hear that frequently from non-Kingstonians, both the film and music worlds. Our festivals, bands, musicians are all, a real selling point and attraction for Kingston. And I know a lot of the work that's gone into the new creative industries strategy. So it's definitely an exciting time to think about ways to keep improving and supporting artists in Kingston, continuing to develop the art sector and make Kingston a real destination. And if the city's also looking for non-monetary ways to support artists in the next year coming through the pandemic, I think adding poster boards conveys a message of support and commitment to those artists. I know they can't go up overnight, but the timing wise, with fewer events happening right now, maybe this is a good time to think about getting some of these boards installed. Hamilton and Ottawa are a couple cities that I've seen just through my own kind of quick dive into what's out there, that they both seem to be doing it well and have developed poster collars that wrap around pre-existing utility poles. So I don't think it needs to be anything that's going to cut into sidewalk space, or I don't think it needs to be a super onerous process, but I feel like, now might be a good time to look into this, and I'd be glad to support in any way that I can. And I'm nearly out of time here, but yeah, thanks for letting me speak, and I look forward to hearing more on this.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Stroud.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, thank you, Mr. Garnis. You did a really good job advocating for the arts community and in its various forms. You mentioned a few of the local venues and how we could cross-pollinate if we could post advertising or posters or whatnot, homemade stuff by bands and so on. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the limitations of the digital media for this purpose, because that was sort of mentioned by Tourism Kingston when they were talking about the phasing out of the board down on Ontario Street. So I wonder if you could speak to the advantages and limitations of digital media and the difference that the public notice board specifically provides.
Is the digital media board the one that has sort of like rotating posters that go through it? Is that what you mean by the digital media?
I just mean any kind of digital
Oh,
media,
okay.
because we're told that because that's what's happening. It's most people are doing their promotion on digital media and social media. That why would we need the physical poster boards any longer is kind of the question.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's assumption that we make, and one that I've certainly made at certain points too, that everybody's just on Facebook or everybody's just on, whatever social media platform one goes to find out about events. But I was really surprised a couple of years ago when the film festival did that survey to find out that many people are actually still finding out about events through print. And I don't know if it's we're just bombarded by so much over social media, we choose to block out more. I'm not sure how that works, but I know in our case, when we did the study, there's still a high percentage of people that are finding out about events through print, and we actually do have a significant marketing budget when it comes to digital. And I think sometimes too, just having tourists come downtown for other reasons, whether they're going to Olivea or they're going to the Leon Center or whatever they happen to be doing, usually folks walk around downtown Kingston too. To have them organically just happen upon, a poster board at whatever intersection they happen to be. I think there's something to be said about people discovering things on their own as well, while they don't mean to, while they're going to Olivea or the Leon Center, they find out about this great band playing at the Toucan as well. So I think there's sort of like that intangible element there as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's I think social media has certainly assisted artists in promoting themselves, but I don't think it should be the only thing that that you utilize.
Thank you. You're really good at dropping in local establishments, and that's probably really appreciated these days. You forgot one big one for live music is also on Brock Street in Uziki. It's
Totally.
another would definitely benefit.
100%.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Stroud.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Patterson. Yeah, I just want to thank you for that presentation, and I completely agree with you. And I do believe there's going to be an enhanced boards out there. I think you've hit upon something really important, and I do believe we already heard that there's going to be more boards out there. I mean, I want them in the rural area. Glen Burnie Grocery should know about it. People come into there, and so there's lots of places that we can continue this kind of promotion, and we support that.
Great, thank you.
So are there any other questions from council? Any questions? Okay. Mr. Harris, thank you very much. And with that, we'll move to our third delegation this evening. We'll invite Donald Mitchell from the Sydenham District Association who will appear before council to speak to clause 2 of report number 54 received from the CAO with respect to 113 Lower Union Street Indigenous Supportive Housing Project. Mr. Mitchell, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, and through you to the rest of City Council and City staff and the public. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Sydenham District Association regarding Clause 2 of Report number 54. The Board of the Sydenham District Association wishes to offer their support for this proposal for 113 Lower Union Street to establish residence in an Indigenous Housing Services Center operated by TP Moza. And I believe our role is to be present, to show up, and it matters. Our community lived experience as residents is that this beautiful location has operated as supportive housing in our community for many years, and we're glad to see it continue to provide that function under its new initiative. Many of our board feel strongly, as do members of our district and association, that we as a community need to come forward and say yes to support initiatives like this and these types of proposals. We need conscious decisions that we all participate in towards provisioning a capital A affordable housing, lower rents, below market, geared to income, purposeful supports for needed homes. And as a district association, we've considered the Mayor's Task Force on Housing report and its recommendations. It's an important document that appears to match or exceed many best practices emerging online and expertise from recent housing related publications. We agree with the staff report that this proposal is positively supported both by the 10-year Municipal Housing and Homelessness Plan and the Mayor's Task Force on Housing recommendations. When considering the report's recent information from the homelessness by name list indicates 45 of the 221 households on the list identify as Indigenous, we recognize and support the need to find many diverse solutions, each designed to remove unique barriers for each set of circumstances. We think that staff, the consultant, and TP Moza are to be commended for discerning a viable path forward, courage and persistence that may not have been the original intended direction. As many of the public may be aware, there's a great deal of background work and public engagement that indirectly informs this report and proposal, and such as, but not limited to, the municipal truth and reconciliation actions, the talking circles. I think the inclusion of the tenant perspective as a portion of the task force on housing, and the willingness of the task force to ensure a home aspect to the work and not simply housing as commodity. Councillor Hutchison's presentation at one task force session, along with other community housing providers. Information sessions such as the Affordable Housing Capital Funding with city staff and Monica Guido representing the CMHC. There are countless other engagements to be sure, and the SDA through its participation can evidence that what we believe is that this is a well-formed proposal. A couple other little points. I think we have to look at accommodation versus engineering a new world. And I see these as steps towards when we will actually rebuild all of this using all of the diversity of solutions to actually hopefully eliminate housing issues and homelessness. The other big thing I wanted to raise was Peter Hodgson, who the city had hired through Three Things Consulting, mentioned about the percentage of youth in the Indigenous population. And I won't quote the statistic because I can't recall it exactly, but a high percentage of their population is youth. And another thing I'd love to see as we go forward is finding ways to engage youth and younger people, especially in a city like Kingston, in some of these solutions. There are an awful lot of the, just to pick a number, 40 and up age demographic that are involved in these solutions, but we really need to challenge ourselves as a city to engage younger populations. Bottom line is the SDA looks forward to welcoming TP Moza into the neighborhood, and we thank you for your time and this consideration.
That's great, thank you. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. In fact, that was very refreshing. When I first heard that a district association was going to speak on this item on the agenda, I was a bit concerned that you were going to say the opposite, because so often when we want to introduce supportive housing in districts, we have people trying to fight it because they don't want mixed use housing or supportive housing in their district. So I really, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you for your presentation and for the message that you just shared with everyone. And having said that, I just wonder too, if you could share with us a little bit more about the conversations that took place, because you mentioned that this property has been used over the use for supportive housing. So I wonder if you could share some more about the positive impacts of having mixed use housing in a district.
Well, that'll be a little hard for me, but I do know that two board members, and it was an initiative that didn't start with me, it started with others, and then as schedules are, one person to the other ends up taking lead, but the whole board was involved online. There are several board members that live very close to this. It was one actually who lives in a heritage home just a couple blocks away, who specifically raised that she would like me to add that point tonight. But I will say, I work 2 blocks away. I'm a big walker person, so I go through the whole neighborhood, and I would not have known the activity of that particular building had I not read the report, the staff report, which just speaks to, there are planning professionals out of the United States that talk about that when you get the form right, the density doesn't really matter, the number of people that live there. And that may seem contrary to a lot of conversations that we have, but I think this is a real example. at 9,260, is it, or some odd square feet, you know, that's half the size almost of the Spire, which is up the street. You know, that's a lot of square footage, you know, and 19 homes, 19 places for people to live. That's a lot of traffic as well. In a downtown core, you talked about location earlier. In a downtown core, that's probably key as we're moving further and further away from car-centric urban planning. You know, you can sustain those kinds of numbers in a building like that. But if you wanted to engage offline, I could certainly give you names of board members who were very interested in this, very positive, and had zero issues living very, very close by here.
Okay, thank you. Next is Councillor Stroud.
Thanks, Your Worship. And thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for coming today on behalf of the board. And thanks for reinforcing the point that this is a district association speaking in favor of a project that might, in some cities and some districts, not get the district association with that stance. So thank you for that. I guess, well, I just want to go back to what you said about the heritage. There was a board member with a heritage home. As you know, it's Sydenham District, Historic Conservation District. This particular building is not a heritage home, but there is one right next door. And actually, you probably know this. I used to live in that one at 115 Lower Union. It's undergoing a renovation as we speak. So is it true then that the association spoke about the heritage impact of this, and that concerns are not that the district members that are more into the heritage files are not concerned about any impact this might have on the heritage of the district?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, we didn't discuss heritage per se, and I have my own perspectives on that. So personally, I would say that I again, similar to what I said about youth, if we don't start to engage, increase traffic, and make our heritage areas viable beyond sort of, the word is terrible, but museum relic type housing, then I think we're going to have a real problem. We need to retain corner stores. We need to retain diverse uses, et cetera. And I think that this building, and you're right, Carl Bray spoke when, Dr. Bray spoke when we enacted the Heritage District Plan about the idea of infill development in amongst heritage buildings, you know, and there are all kinds of considerations to that. But I think that I could infer from the couple of people I had conversations with via email on this, and the fact that one of them was interested in possibly being a board member of TP MOSA, should they still be looking for board members, just shows a real interest to see unique, diverse, I mean, this is the path of the future. It's the way we all get to know each other better. That type of mindset was very much present in our discussions, but we didn't really ground down into, is this appropriate in a heritage district type conversation?
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, Mr. Mitchell, thank you very much.
Thank you.
With that, we'll continue on in our agendas. So we have no further delegations. We have no briefings. Are there any petitions to present? Okay, seeing none. We do have several motions of congratulations. First, moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that the sincere congratulations of Kingston City Council will be extended to Abby Tripp, who will represent Canada at the Tokyo Paralympics Fall 2021. Ms. Tripp, age 20 this year, is an accomplished Kingston swimmer, coached by Vicky Keith. Ms. Tripp has already competed in the Toronto Pan Am Games 2015, the Rio Paralympics in 2016, the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games in 2018, where she medaled, the London World Paraswim Championship in 2019, where she medaled, and the Toronto Canadian Swimming Trials in 2019, where she won gold, all as a teenager with cerebral palsy. She also holds Canadian records in 400s freestyle and 200-meter individual medley. All of Kingston is cheering for you, Abby. Moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Neal. The sincere congratulations of Kingston City Council be extended to Will Crothers of Kingston, who will represent Canada at the Tokyo Olympics as a rower in the men's four. Crothers has been competing internationally for Canada since 2004. Will Crothers was a member of the men's eight that won silver at London 2012, After that, he competed primarily with the four for many years, winning World Cup bronze in Lucerne in 2014, which was followed by a 5th place finish at the World Championships. All of Kingston is cheering for you, Will. Number 3, moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Neal, that sincere congratulations of Kingston City Council be extended to veteran CKWS television Global Kingston sports anchor Doug Jeffries on the occasion of his 45 years in radio and television broadcasting. In his 25 years on the airwaves and local radio and 20 years on television, Doug has worked tirelessly to promote local athletes and sports organizations across Kingston and southeastern Ontario. There were few broadcasters in Canada who can match Doug's passion and knowledge as a community champion and cheerleader of youth in local sport. Congratulations on this exciting milestone. With the indulgence of council, I am going to add a 4th motion of congratulations, moved by Mayor Patterson, seconded by Deputy Mayor Neal, that the sincere congratulations of Kingston City Council be extended to Dr. Kieran Moore on his appointment as Ontario's new Chief Medical Officer of Health. Certainly, we want as council to thank Dr. Moore for his incredible leadership, incredible efforts at public health over the years, and certainly over the last year during the pandemic. And we certainly wish him all the best and offer him our full support in his new role. So with that, I will ask for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we have no deferred motions, so we will move on to reports. And first up, we have report number 53 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Stroud, seconded by Councillor Bowen, that report number 53 from the Chief Administrative Officer, consent, be received and adopted.
So there are 4 clauses. Would anyone like any of the clauses separated? Okay, I'm not seeing any requests for separation, so we will vote on the items as a whole. So clause 1, it's a parking bylaw minor amendments. Clause 2, repeal and replace bylaw 2007-193, being a bylaw to establish and regulate fire and rescue services. Number 3, award of contract, print shop paper and filing supplies. Number 4, award of contract, renovations and alterations to resident room, washrooms, tub, and shower facilities at Rita Crest Home. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to report number 54 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Osterhoff, that report number 54 from the Chief Administrative Officer recommend be received and adopted clause by clause.
Okay, so the first clause is 2021 final tax levy and tax rates. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Number 2, 113 Lower Union Street Indigenous Supportive Housing Project. Any discussion? Councillor Kyler.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Through you to staff. I'm wondering if staff could just help council understand the relationship between TP Mosa and the city. We understand that they are going to be providing the supportive housing, but as we are loaning for $1, can you explain, are we responsible for the actual physical plant and they're just doing the programming, or just delineate that relationship a bit, if you would, please?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. And that's correct. So we as a city will continue to own the building. We are proposing an initial 5-year lease, and we will continue to be responsible for the larger maintenance. And obviously, if council approves this proposal tonight, we will work with TP Mosa on the programming, the supports, and the smaller day-to-day kind of maintenance of the building.
Okay, thank you. And supplemental, the reason I ask, Ms. Nordegraff, through you, Mayor Patterson, is because I know some of the programming that Mr. Ritwidge mentioned at the beginning of the meeting could require some alteration to facilities. So I think, for example, if there were to be smudging ceremonies, perhaps disabling of the fire alarms and that type of thing. And I'm just hoping to understand how tight our relationship with is so we can ensure that the space is there and it can be used as they intend it to be.
Yeah, and through you to kind of jump on that question, absolutely. And we will work very closely with with TIPI and also with our own, departments to make sure that we can support those various specific cultural needs. Also in line with, for instance, the Mayor's Task Force on Housing recommendations. And we do have some time to work through that with the proponents.
Excellent. I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. Also, a quick question to staff. I think we've pretty much covered it all, but to the point of the cultural piece that that our delegate was speaking of, Mr. Ritwidge, about the unique nature of TP Moza, and I was just if you could, perhaps you or another member of staff that's familiar could speak to the collaboration that the city cultural services or any other of the city departments that might intersect on that particular aspect, and what that means to the city processes for this site.
Thank you, and through you. So that's another great question. So obviously, this partnership is in addition to the great work that has been done and continues to be done on the Engage for Change project as a community, as a city, and as a community. This, again, specifically, and the delegation spoke to this as well, is providing some additional, kind of exposure for both the Housing and Social Services departments, but also other housing providers to really get better cultural proficiency in providing housing supports and housing services in the community. So this is really complementing the existing work that the city has already been doing, and is really adding, again, in line with some of the Mayor's Task Force of Housing recommendations, but also our 10-year housing plan, kind of action plan. That also really speaks, and again, the delegation spoke to this as well, to the disproportionate representation of the Indigenous community in our homelessness population, but also the population that's in core housing needs.
Yeah, and as a just quick follow-up to specify, I believe I kind of asked you this when we spoke earlier. How do we know that these homeless folks might be Indigenous?
Thank you for that question. Through you, I will say that obviously we do want to work very closely with TP Moza on the kind of the programming and the intake and the process. We really would like to, have TP Moza guide us in that process and obviously work with us. And rely on their relationships with clients to determine the access to the service. I know there are lots of different, there's a lot of history, and I know we've kind of obviously addressed that today, and it's a very great opportunity to really build that relationship forward with TP Moza, but also with other partners in this project.
Okay. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you. Oh, that's it. That's all.
Thank you. So next on my list is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to express my support for this. You can see that staff did quite a bit of work, if you read between the lines in the report, to find a constructive alternative, and I think they've succeeded. And as is being indicated by other speakers, that this helps our housing and homelessness situation in a multiple number of ways. We've had to be creative financially and otherwise in order to make it work, but so far so good. And Mr. Ritwidge really did a good job explaining the advantages here and how TP Moza will conduct the service. And Mr. Mitchell spoke well about the neighborhood approach. So I think all in all, this is a good step forward. And I just wanted to congratulate the partners in the agreement, including our own staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other speakers on my list. Oh, Councillor Paul, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, yes, also wanted to pass on congratulations to staff and the staff here at the city, and also to TP Moza and their board and staff for all the good work in putting this project together, this proposal. I had just one question. We, as part of the outreach, I know for housing and homelessness, for the review, there were discussions with a number of service providers in the city about the need for supportive housing. And that, of course, became one of the sort of core focuses of the work for the Housing and Homelessness Committee. And I'm just curious if this is the first example of our involvement in supportive housing, or if there are others that currently exist. That might be a tough one. There was a project with Anguanada, but just this model of the city owning the property and bringing in a service provider.
Okay.
Thank you, and through you, yes, this is the first building that we as a city procured proactively to respond to the need for additional kind of supportive and transitional housing. And there certainly are a lot of different varieties of supportive housing. It's not a one size fits all. So this is certainly the first kind of project where we as a city have procured a building and work with the proponents. And I think over the course of the pandemic and obviously the 10-year plan and the mayor's task force, we are learning and trying, what the best, solutions are. So this is certainly the first project.
Thanks. So yeah, further congratulations on that point, because yeah, as I mentioned, this was identified as really the key starting point, not just to be developing. We all know there's a need for more affordable housing, of course, but to ensure that we have a supply of supportive housing, because we've seen a number of times over the course of the last year that often individuals who are experiencing homelessness require more than a house or an apartment or a room. They require support. And so this is it's an incredible step forward, and I'm really, really happy to see it. Thank you again for all the work.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will call the vote then on clause 2. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Clause 3, Kingston Economic Recovery Team update and mandate renewal. Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First thing I wanted to say was that there's a lot of good work outlined in this report. And sometimes when you think about what we can do in terms of economic and social recovery from the pandemic, it's difficult to think where to start and what to do first. But this actually gives you something. I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask. One is that it indicates that staff will support initiatives of CURT, that's the Economic Recovery Team, working groups. So I just want to know, will these initiatives be brought to council before implementation? Some of them maybe under some kind of criteria.
Mr. Desjardins.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the councillor. Depending on the size and scope of the specific projects, we would certainly bring those to council. If we're not proposing any requests for additional funds, our strategy has been to secure grant funds to support these projects. But we certainly provide, as we did, I think it was report 2007 or 2207, we did provide an update on activities. So I think the best thing we to do is to bring back sort of regular updates to council just to make everybody aware of what's going on.
Okay. Okay, thanks for that. That's good to hear. I thought it would be under some kind of criteria, so, it would be evaluated. Could you explain more about the development of a regional commuter strategy?
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the councillor. That's part of a project that has been funded by the provincial government through the Eastern Ontario Leadership Council. The Leadership Council represents both the Warden's Caucus and the Mayor's Caucus of Eastern Ontario, so approximately 104 municipalities. And one of the things that we've been looking at, one of the priorities of that body is actually economic development priorities, and very specifically workforce. And we've been looking at the relationship pre-COVID and certainly the impacts post-COVID of access to the necessary talent and employment for our employers. So the goal has been to understand where people are commuting to and from, and understanding whether there's perhaps innovative opportunities to look at regional busing. I'm not promising anything. We're at a very early stage, but one of the exciting opportunities is the federal government's announced a fairly significant rural transit program. There isn't any details yet of that program, but certainly the opportunity to explore and understand opportunities to assist workers to gain access to employment is obviously an important part of the pandemic recovery strategy for the whole country.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I think I can hear Councillor Stroud salivating around there. Which is great. It's fine by me. So also, this is an idea that's come up before, but I don't think it's actually happened. And as we're looking at redesigning our business support services, including a business concierge. Is that different from what KEDCO is doing, or what is involved in that?
Through your worship to the councillor. Yes, so that's as part of the SLA agreement that Council and Kingston Economic Development created and approved. It actually empowered the city to create a new position. We have a business support manager that's part of my group, and under her leadership is really the development of this new concierge service. The feedback in both focus group and also in surveys from the business sector is a desire to see fast and rapid response to irritants and challenges that they're having in dealing with, specifically with the city. And we've certainly just started this. It's still a fairly new initiative, but getting certainly very positive feedback on that ability to rapidly get around. And so instead of having the customer, the business entrepreneur have to phone around to 5 or 6 different departments, our business support manager is able to quickly navigate, get an answer, and respond as rapidly as possible.
That's good, sort of a triage.
That's correct, yes.
And so good. I mean, that's been in the works, I don't know for how many years. It's good to see it happening. The question that's asked here in the report is, how do we increase community resilience to support economic and social recovery post-COVID? And I think that's an excellent question. One of the things, this is a comment, not a question. One of the things I really liked about this is the way in which the business concerns and broader social concerns are brought together, and the involvement of PhD students, and others from Queens in looking at the problems we face. I think that's really a step in the right direction, because people often talk about that. Why don't we use the expertise of Queens or RMC or St. Lawrence? And it looks like we're making steps to do more of that. And so there was this group, in work poverty group, basically means those who are employed but still are under stressful economic conditions. And I'm really happy to see that in conjunction with the business initiatives. So I'm happy to vote for this.
Thank you.
Did Mr. Desjardins have anything you wanted to add to that?
Thank you, Councillor, and I appreciate your positive support. You know, again, one of the outcomes I think of the pandemic, positive outcomes, is a clear understanding of the interconnection between economic development, the hard economic development of jobs and GDP and those kind of stats, and community development and sustainable social development. You can't separate those things. Health and economic development are linked. You know, housing and economic development are linked. And if that's the lesson we've learned, then that's a good lesson to learn, and we can build forward to sort of be a little bit more proactive and aligned as we build the recovery.
So just one last comment is that really what I get from this is that we're only as strong as the floor that we build on ourselves and the structures that we have to maintain our social but also economic demand and activity. So it all works together. So thank you for that comment.
Thank you.
And I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will call the vote on clause 3. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Clause 4. This is the approval of the plan for administration of the City of Kingston Cultural Heritage Fund in 2021-22, prepared by the Kingston Association of Museums, Art Galleries, and Historic Sites. You'll see there that we are looking for a councillor to volunteer to participate in the review committee for the project grants, and then another volunteer to participate in the review committee for operating grants. Could I have a volunteer, 2 volunteers preferably for those committees? Councillor Kiley, you're first in. Did you have a preference between project grants and operating grants?
No, actually, sorry, I just couldn't unmute. I've done operating for the past 2 years and would be happy to do it again. So if someone wanted to do the other one, that's fine by me. And if they want to flip it, that's okay too.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Neal.
I'm quite happy to do the project grant one. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll just note then the recommendation. We'll read that Councillor Kiley will participate in the operating grant review and Deputy Mayor Neal on the project grant review. Okay, we'll call the vote then. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to report number 55 from Planning Committee.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Neal, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that report number 55 from the Planning Committee be received and adopted.
So there's just the one clause, approval of an application for zoning bylaw amendment, 58 and 60 Yonge Street. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And report number 56 from Heritage Kingston.
Moved by Councillor Osterhoff, seconded by Councillor Doherty, that report number 56 from Heritage Kingston be received and adopted.
Yes, there are a number of items and approvals, and also the Heritage Kingston report card for 2020. If there are no separations, then we will vote on the whole. Oh, I see. Councillor Stroud, which item would you like to separate? Number 1, subsection 1? Okay. So first we will vote on the remainder of the report, and then we will circle back to item 1, subsection 1. So on the balance of the report, other than the excluded item, we will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. So now we have under clause 1, application supported for approval by Heritage Kingston, subsection 1, approval of application for Ontario Heritage Act approval 216 Ontario Street. Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Worship. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Question to staff. This is similar to a file that came to the Heritage Committee when I was still the chair, and I just wanted to get a few things clear that weren't in the report. So the file that it's similar to was the steps in front of the Frontenac County Courthouse also needed work. And that was actually quite controversial at committee. due to the clash between trying to retain the old materials and having something that engineering wise is sound and safe as the staircase is supposed to be. And I remember that quite a bit of back and forth at committee for the courthouse steps issue. So on the City Hall steps, so it's proposing to reconstruct the staircases and then an exterior concrete structure, right? So that would be new materials. And then at one point it says, I don't have that, I've got just the clause in front of me, but I remember from the report, retaining some of the original limestone elements for possible reuse was, I think, what was said. So maybe if staff could tell us from a heritage standpoint what we're talking about here, like are the how much of the original limestone is being retained and how much will be perhaps used somewhere else?
Thank you, and through you, I can certainly start. So the stairs have been assessed, and there are aspects of the front steps that have damage to them, as you've noted, that have to have some replacement done. And you can also see in the report, there was some fruitful discussion about the sourcing of that limestone. Part of the recommendations that were brought forward at Heritage Kingston was the suggestion to attempt to repair and retain as much of those elements as possible. At this point, I don't believe there's actually a clear percentage that I can offer in terms of how much of the stairs can be retained. I believe that will be part of kind of the investigation as the repair is ongoing to take apart and assess where the cracking is and the kind of damage. And they have found a source of local Kingston limestone to assist in the replacement, so it will be like for like replacement. Similarly, the mortar will conform with the city's policy on mortar and stonework. So we have assurances there that we are following the appropriate guidelines and procedures. I hope that addresses, but I'm happy to speak more specifically if you'd like, Councillor Stroud.
Well, I just, I guess it's just, maybe I misread or misinterpreted something that was in the report. Let me just see if I can find it here. I'll quote it to you as soon as I find it. Hang on a sec. I should have highlighted it. I'm sorry. I guess it was my interpretation of the conditions, and so the alteration is repair, reconstruct both staircases, including an exterior concrete structure clad in Kingston limestone. So that's the source of Kingston limestone you're talking about. So that's new material, but original Kingston limestone, and new concrete. And then with the old and worn pieces, are they not, we don't know to what extent they're reusable, but would we not be attempting to use as much of that limestone, actual limestone that was from 1840s in the reconstruction?
Thank you, and through you. That's correct, Councillor Stroud. We will be trying to retain, and FMCS facilities will be trying to, while supporting the project, having the contractor maintain, repair, reinstall whatever elements can be. And if not, we also are interested in whether or not those elements can be retained for perhaps repair other places and spaces within the structure. So trying to reuse as much of that period material as possible, even if it does have to be replaced in the context of the stairs.
Right. Well, yeah. So what you just said there was sort of what I had read somewhere, is that it might get reused somewhere else in the structure, but not necessarily on the steps. So I guess the obvious conundrum is that some of these steps are worn to the point, like they're worn down to the point that they can't really be used as the surface of the new steps. But we might be able to reuse that limestone somewhere else, if limestone is needed somewhere else in the structure. That's what you're saying?
That's correct. As a practice, trying to retain as much of the original element if we can reuse it elsewhere in the facility. That's certainly a help in matching. As you might have seen in the report, there was some discussion about new limestone and the requirement to age it to get the right visual on it. And certainly that will happen with the Kingston limestone. But if we're able to reuse period works elsewhere or period pieces of that stone, that's certainly a benefit for future repairs if required. So if there are large enough samples, the city would be interested in retaining them, yes, for reuse elsewhere if appropriate.
Yeah, I guess I don't have an answer to my question of whether we learned from the Frontenac courthouse file of the best practice, heritage practice to be used there, because I don't think there was ever agreement on that particular one about how to do it. But I don't see this in this report. It doesn't say that this comes back to the Heritage Committee a second time. So they've given their input. I presume it's along the same lines as I witnessed with the Frontenac County Courthouse. And what we have here is in black and white is the conditions, which specifically say, you know, as they're written there. So it comes back to the Director of Planning if there's any questions about the heritage attributes, I suppose. So it doesn't come back to the Heritage Committee. I guess maybe I could ask my colleagues that sit on heritage, because I wasn't at the meeting. Was there a controversy at the committee about the point of whether or not we can reuse the limestone from the steps?
So Councillor Stroud, I'll just note you have about 20 seconds left on the clock, which I've paused. So I'll give a chance for the committee members to respond, and then I'll just note that Commissioner Agnew also has her hand raised. So Councillor Stroud.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Patterson. I don't recall that, Councillor Stroud. I don't recall a whole lot of discussion there, and maybe Councillor Doherty will, but I don't have anything for you.
I don't recall major discussion around this either, and I think if there was, then we would have remembered.
Commissioner Agnew.
Thank you, and through your worship. Just Councillor Stroud, I've just gone back through the report. So I think there may be some additional information that could be of help. I believe that's on page 6 of 10 of the report, and the paragraph specifically that talks a little bit to the methodology and the structural engineering report that was done to look at the validity of the material that's there and the integrity of the staircase particularly. And that specifically notes that the plan includes careful dismantling of the limestone steps and landings, retaining any reusable stones for possible use on future projects. So definitely, from a conservation and preservation perspective, there's always the strong preference to be able to repair what's there, and the pieces as through the dismantling that has to take place as part of the restoration to ensure the structural integrity and the safety of the stairs. Any of those remnant pieces can be preserved and utilized either in other sections of this project or as part of other restoration work. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and to identify for council where that is in the report that's spoken to. I believe there has been some good learning that's taken place from past projects, and certainly our facility management group has done an excellent job in really providing a lot of attention to detail in terms of the restoration work that's proposed here.
Thank you. I'll use my last 20 seconds to say good luck with the work. I am a little worried about the final result, because it is very easy to take a wrong turn with this kind of project. So I just wanted to urge staff to proceed with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we'll call the vote then on clause 1, subsection 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving on to report number 57 from the Nominations Advisory Committee.
Moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that report number 57 from the Nominations Advisory Committee be received and adopted.
Okay, so there is just the one clause. We'll note public appointments to committees for the Tax Commission, Diane Aziz and Stephen Fraser. For Heritage Kingston, Janine O'Reilly and Edmund Ted Smith. Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee, William McMillian. and the Arts Advisory Committee, Tim Ford. So we will pull the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we have nothing from Committee of the Whole. Information reports. So our first information report is asset management planning, and we will kick that off with a briefing. So Brent Fowler, Director of Corporate Asset Management and Fleet, will provide introductory remarks and introduce Darius Ismaili, Project Consultant for GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited, to brief Council on report number 21-117, respect to asset management planning. Okay. So, Mr. Fowler, I will turn it over to you.
Through you, Your Worship. I'm not able to turn my video on, but oh, there we go. Through you, Your Worship. At the end of 2019, we started working with the team at GM Blue Plan on a project to develop both a corporate asset management framework that can be used by all municipal service areas, as well as the development of a core asset management plan. I would like to introduce Darius Ismaili, Senior Asset Management Consultant with GM Blue Plan and the current project manager working with us on the city's asset management project. Throughout his career, Darius has successfully led several asset management projects in both the public and private sectors, including the implementation of the City of Guelph's Corporate Asset Management Program. The upcoming presentation will provide an overview of asset management and a status update regarding our corporate asset management project. I will now turn it over to Darius to walk through the presentation.
Thank you very much, and through you, Mayor Patterson, to members of council, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today on what is part of a truly interesting and exciting journey for the city. So we're going to be talking about the corporate asset management plan, and if you could just navigate to the next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of the slides and presentation today, we'll give a bit of an overview of the project and asset management in general. We'll cover some best practices in asset management and the regulatory requirements, as well as then discuss the approach that the city is currently taking to essentially establish the asset management program, including upcoming timeline. Next slide, please. So there's been a lot of regulatory advances within Ontario for asset management in particular. And one of the most prominent changes with that is OREG 58817, which really outlines very specific requirements for asset management planning for municipalities across Ontario. So the first main deadline was July 1st, 2019 to establish the strategic asset management policy, which the city has established. And then the next main milestone is by July 1st, 2022, to have an asset management plan in place for core assets. So that's determined by or defined by the Ministry of Infrastructure as roads, water, wastewater, stormwater, and bridges. The next step is by July 1st, 2024, to have the asset management plan in place for all assets. And then by July 1st, 2025, there's a target to establish additional requirements around documenting the level of service provided by the assets, as well as the financial strategy to address that. Next slide, please. So why is asset management important and engagement? Essentially, asset management, as I'll show in one of the upcoming slides, really is a multidisciplinary approach applied across the entire organization. When we talk about assets, it's essentially any item that has value to the organization. Typically, we're referring to infrastructure assets. And asset management is really the process that the organization applies to realize that value. So staff, senior management, council, the public, and various other stakeholders are key components of that asset management system of the organization. Next slide, please. And there's several key principles. There's a lot that goes into asset management, but if you were to summarize it in a nutshell, it really is around making the best possible decisions about the assets. To do that, we apply structured approaches around managing and understanding risk and using quantifiable and quantitative approaches to do that. We look at providing satisfactory levels of service and documenting the requirements, but as well communicating the impact of decisions on levels of service into the future. And then in addition to that, optimizing the life cycle costs of the assets. So that's looking at all of the costs, the total cost of ownership of assets, and evaluating options based upon the findings of that. Next slide, please. So this is a typical life cycle of an asset, and the analogy I always like to use is a vehicle. So if you imagine there's that upfront cost of purchase of a vehicle, and then throughout the vehicle's life cycle, you may have the operating expenditures. So that would be the energy consumption, the fuel that's used, and that side of things. You take it in for a service based on timing and kilometers. That would be the preventative maintenance. And then for some larger assets, we don't typically always do this for vehicles, but there may be an engine overhaul in midlife or a rebuild or a respray of the vehicle, and that renews the asset to like new condition. You may be driving and hear a rattle, or you may hear sort of observe a deficiency and take that in for what's termed as corrective maintenance. And then with that, there's various inspections and so on. At the end of the life cycle, often there's a disposal. So with vehicles, often there's salvage value, but for other assets, there may be a cleanup costs or remediation requirements. So this is the typical asset life cycle when we're looking at that whole life cycle approach. Next slide, please. The interesting thing is if you take those costs or those impacts throughout the life cycle and you add them up, this is that same graphic, just with a cumulative line plotted. That upfront cost, the upfront capital expenditure, is only typically around 20% of the value, and that varies depending on the asset. The interesting thing is that the highest impact on the total life cycle cost is actually determined right up front at the design or the acquisition or specification stage. So that's why it's extremely important that we look at the whole life cycle picture, and the lowest cost up front doesn't always result in the lowest overall life cycle cost. To drive this though, there needs to be the information to support those requirements. Next slide, please. So all assets, and there's multiple services that the city is responsible for, all of them have unique life cycles. So they all have unique regulatory requirements, specifications and ways they should be managed. And through asset management planning and the asset management plans that are in development, essentially the goal is to create a corporately consistent approach to managing those assets and to demonstrate alignment with the strategic business plans and organizational objectives. Next slide, please. And there's several key documents in the system. So I mentioned earlier the regulatory requirements around the strategic asset management policy, which was developed in 2019. And that really outlines how the asset management objectives will be achieved. And the asset management plan really outlines the very specific requirements around the quantity of the assets, the framework and the roadmap to achieve those asset management objectives. And that's what's in development. Next slide, please. And so there's lots of components to asset management. So first we have those life cycle activities I talked about. And then in support of those, there's the capital and operating strategies and the various funding strategies. In the green boxes there, you can see the requirements that have been put in place that correspond to the regulation. They really go into understanding the big picture of asset management and the needs and requirements. But to do all of this, we really need to have the enabling processes that we call them. That's having the resources and skills, the business processes in place, and the information systems and tools to do that repeatedly over thousands of assets. And all of this is really to provide service. So levels of service is extremely important within the picture of asset management. Now you'll note some examples of different stakeholder groups that are involved in the process, and it truly is an organization-wide effort, and that's the approach that the city is taking on the asset management program. Next slide, please. So the work plan that the city is undertaking is to first establish an overall framework, including various components, stakeholder engagement, best practice reviews, and various other aspects. and then moving into the development of the core asset management plan, which is in progress. It's pretty close to wrapping up now. And that includes documenting levels of service, documenting risk frameworks, the life cycle strategies, and a change management plan and a roadmap for the next 5 years. Next slide, please. So one of the key components of this was a best practice review, and that was reviewing each of actually the municipalities there, that's their asset management plans, and that was interviewing the staff involved with rolling out those programs. So those are organizations that I personally have had a chance to work with, as well as several members of our team, and we're really able to capture the different approaches and the lessons learned in implementing their program, and at the same time understand the journeys that they've taken, as well as share knowledge along the way. Next slide, please. In a nutshell, asset management really is around determining the levels of service, and that's one of the key components overall. Managing growth, so growth is a big component of ensuring that we're looking at the whole life cycle and the life cycle requirements. There's the full life cycle management, like I said, so looking from start to end for the asset life and beyond, and then managing risk and having all of this information that feeds into an evidence-based financial plan. Next slide, please. So for the next steps within the asset management program, it's really wrapping up, defining levels of service, the risk, and really assuring cost effectiveness throughout the life cycle and each of the components that were presented today. There will be a presentation to Council for the core asset management plan and framework in Q4 2021. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and we'll now open it up for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from Council? Councillor Hutchison.
Okay, so it's good to see this and that we're getting going forward constructively, because I've been hearing about this since I first was on council, and that was 14 years ago. And is my impression correct that the government, the provincial government has required this of municipalities, but they've extended the deadline numerous times? I actually just want to contextualize my questions. So that's my first question.
Through the mayor to Councillor Hutchinson. Yes, it's been extended one time, and that was actually due to the impacts of COVID. So there was extensive consultation that went into the first establishing the requirements, and essentially there were from 2017, the timelines were set out, and essentially just this year, because of the impact of COVID, the future timelines were pushed out by 1 year.
Okay. I think it was, I can't help but observing that. I think it's been extended before that. Okay, but what I want to know is just a general question, is usually replacement reserve schedules, which are involved in this, show a long tunnel with a small point of light that you might get to. So what state would you say the city is in terms of potential funding and being able to complete this asset management plan successfully at this point in time?
I'll just let Brent answer that question.
Mr. Feller.
Hi, through you, your mayor. The current, what we've been working with GM Blue Plan on is actually reviewing all of our data, our asset registers, and some of the modeling is not yet complete. But our plan is to bring that forward in Q4 and present the findings. But we're not yet completed on the analysis of the existing assets and some of our modeling assumptions, working with Des and the finance team through that as we speak right now.
Okay. The reason that is often with these asset management plans, you have it all drawn up, but you realize you haven't got all the funding you need at the particular times. So you have to manage it, of course, and that's fine. But if you're lucky, you can say, or lucky or good management, you can say, yes, we can handle this. It'll be difficult, but we can handle it. We can see an end to this. Well, there's no end, but we can see our way through. Would that describe the situation as the city's in, or do we not have enough information yet?
Mr. Feller? Or Ms. Kennedy?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just thought maybe I could add to that. So as Mr. Fowler said, we're sort of at the start of pulling this information together, and finance has been involved, working with Brent's department and with Blue Line to incorporate some of what we already have in our financial models. So to your question, Councillor Hutchison, you're correct. Normally when we do these types of exercises, it comes back, and when the focus is on what we should be investing, we tend to not be able to afford what we should be investing in. But I think what we will see here, and again, I think we've still got a lot of work to do before it comes back to council. But you'll recall in our 15-year plans, we have actually increased investment in some of our areas in the out years, with the anticipation that we already know today that we're not investing in some of our asset classes to the level that we should be. So what we're hoping is as the work is done, as the information comes back, we'll update those models, and we'll be able then to bring that back to council with some more information in terms of whether we've still got some funding gaps, or potentially where we may even need to move funding around within our 15-year models.
Okay. Thank you so much. I just want to encourage this because I think it's totally vital to the prospects of the city. And the city never stops, so we're going to have to do this in some way. It's better to be planned than not.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Kylie.
Thanks, Mayor Patterson, and through you to staff. Thanks for the report. Thanks for the description. I think the slide showing the life cycle is encouraging, and I know that Councillor McLaren had a motion about that last term. So I think that this is great to see across the corporation. I'm wondering tonight, though, about best practices that were mentioned. I'm wondering, in looking at the other cities that you had on the screen, and maybe you hear the baby crying in the background, so apologies. Did you come across any municipalities, or did you review any municipalities? Because I know there are some that are looking at natural assets. So in other words, commodifying the ways in which forests or streams actually lessen the financial burden on the city, where if you, for example, covered a creek, you'd have to have some type of built infrastructure to do the job that that natural asset was doing. So I'm wondering if that was part of the consideration here at all.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. So I can't recall specifically within that data set, but that is something that is definitely being practiced in the industry. There's a lot of advancements that are happening in the industry at the moment, and with respect to that. So the current asset management plan is focused on core assets as defined by the Ministry of Infrastructure. However, there is a scope looking at across the cities for that framework component. But definitely that natural assets is a key area of asset management at the moment.
Yeah, that's great. And going forward, when we move away from that core definition, which I understand is provincially mandated, I'd really like to see that incorporated into our future work. Thanks.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the demonstration and the charts. They were very helpful. In particular, the accumulated costs was really interesting. I wonder, how much did you analyze energy costs, like we're electrifying our cars, but also insulation in our building and just those kind of running costs, and how much you looked at renewable energies and energy efficiency?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So with the assets included in this current plan, energy efficiency, it wasn't necessarily applied in a sense because we are looking at roads, stormwater, and other transportation assets. However, the environmental sustainability is one of the considerations that underpins all of the asset management plans, actually, and is included as a consideration. So within this current plan, based on the assets that were in there, we have looked at sustainability of those assets, as well as when looking at them from a risk perspective, and as well as from levels of service. There were sustainability indicators. However, energy consumption wasn't necessarily applied, say, to the facilities just because they're not currently included in this plan.
Thank you. It's just a follow-up question. I understand with running some pipes that there could be some efficiencies. Did you, how do we have like engineers that have a background, environmental backgrounds that are involved in these kind of studies? Because I was recently at a meeting with Queens and there was talk that we could do some things when we dig our roads up and we run new pipes, that there more could possibly be done. That could save us money down the road.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just for a point of clarification, the core assets, as Mr. Ismaili has indicated, includes water, wastewater. So in Kingston, with our Utilities Kingston is responsible for the asset for managing and for the asset management plans for water and wastewater. And we've been having conversations with them as well. So they will be bringing their updated water wastewater plans to council as well. And they're targeting Q3 or Q4 of this year. So that would probably be a very good question, Councillor Doherty, to present to them as it relates to the underground infrastructure.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, seeing no other questions, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and for answering those questions. So with that, we will move on then to information report number 2, strategic plan quarterly report Q1 2021. Okay, we have no information reports from members of council. Miscellaneous business, we have several items. We have moved by Councillor Hutchison and seconded by Councillor Neal, but I'll just note that the first is a draw for deputy mayor slots. So we have Councillor Hill, Councillor Chappell, and Councillor Osterhoff put their names forward. So I will just ask for the clerk and Madam Deputy Clerk to do the draws for the order.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. The first name drawn is Councillor Osterhoff. Councillor Osterhoff, you'll be assigned the dates of August and September. Next, we have Councillor Hill in October and November. And that leaves us with Councillor Chappell for December 2021 and January 2022.
Okay. Thank you. So, so first we will then call that vote. Again, that's moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor Neal. Can I? Yes. So we're not. Yeah, that's right. We're going to give you until the next council meeting in case you want to change your concepts. Okay. Okay. So with that, then we'll move to the other items of miscellaneous business. Moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor Neal. Number 2, that as requested by Julia Verdugo, Childhood Cancer Canada, Council proclaims September 2021 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in Kingston. And then number 3, moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Deputy Mayor Neal, that as requested by Mary Grant, Operation Smiles Canada, Council proclaimed June 20th, 2021 as longest day of smiles in Kingston. And then number 4, moved by Councillor Kiley, seconded by Deputy Mayor Neal, that notwithstanding section 3.1.3, subsection 3 of the flag display policy, Kingston City Council approved the display of the Pride flag in Confederation Park on June 15th, 2021 in commemoration of Pride Month. So we will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to new motions. First, new motion, moved by Councillor Hutchison, seconded by Councillor McLaren. Whereas public notice boards allow the public to communicate and make significant and useful connections at the grassroots, neighborhood, and community level in an alternative way to other forms of communication. Whereas public notice boards are an affordable and accessible method of public communication and are used for live music, cultural festivals, charitable events, lost pets, yard sales, public meetings, and more to vitalize our community. Therefore, be it resolved that staff be requested to develop a better management plan for public notice boards in the city, including consideration for increasing the number of public notice boards and their locations, their design and ongoing maintenance, and report back to council by Q4 2021. Councillor Hutchison, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the second time, and I was gratified to see quite a bit of support at council for something along this line last time. And so the point here is that public notice boards serve as a form of communication at the grassroots, community, and neighborhood levels. And we should be looking to maintain them and perhaps even increase them. And in different parts of the city, they're not equitably distributed. And I think that's not a good thing. And I think they should be, and to serve different parts of our community. So I'm asking here that we do have staff study this and look at what the best way to do this is, and look at location, numbers, design, as you heard from the presenter, the delegation earlier. There are different ways of doing this. And there are different ways of doing this so they can be maintained in better or worse ways. So, I would ask you for your support for this, and that so we can find out what the best way to move forward for our community is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, through you, your worship. I really agree with this motion. I think this is a great thing, and not only a great thing, and I think it's just timely, I guess, really, that we're kind of looking at it again, really based on the fact that we've lost a few of them. But I do think it is kind of an opportunity for us to identify like a center point or a meeting place, in each of the districts. And I hope that that all the districts would be considered for this kind of notice boards, or you've certainly seen some that really do an effective job of that, and usually they're located at places where people intersect with one another or gather, and I just think it does really add to the grassroots community support of lots of different events and lots of different issues and lots of different local debate, and I think that's ongoing now. Not just across the city with issues, that affect the whole community, but also in each district, because each district has unique sets of issues and unique areas of interest and unique things that they want to promote. So I think it's a wonderful idea that should really be something that visitors to the community see throughout the community. And maybe, in some key areas like the downtown core, there might be more than one, but certainly at least one in each district. So I certainly support Councillor Hutchison's motion. Thank you.
Next is Deputy Mayor Neal.
Thank you very much. It's a bit of a history behind the notice boards. Back in the 90s, I think it was Peterborough passed a bylaw outlawing putting posters on trees and on signposts. And at the time, there was a lawsuit saying that it was an expression of free speech. And so the signboards were an attempt to address that issue. And I know that there's a lot of support for the signboards that address cultural events and festivals and things like that. The reality is there's a lot of signage that goes up that is political in nature or announcing rallies or social justice issues. And I think we need to recognize the validity of those things as well. And so the signboards, I frankly would support the idea of adding to the number, that minimal number. I know that there were 8 and now there's 5 and we're looking, but we should offer the opportunity for, and we shouldn't necessarily try to censor those things. Now, when I was in Victoria, where my oldest son family lives, they have a really interesting thing that I think our staff could look into. And that's, there's sleeves that they put around every 3rd or 4th post in the downtown area that is specifically made so that it's really easy to peel off any postering that goes onto those. And I think that's the main complaint, is that when there's a lot of the postering that takes place, and it can be cultural events that poster as well. And that's a particularly common thing in the core of the city. So I think if we can look into that possibility of having some of those sleeves that go on, I think that that would be a good way to address that as well. So I see some people shaking their head in disbelief, but I think that that's something we need to recognize because it's a reality in the core of the city. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Stanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support this motion for sure. I just have a question for staff. So 2 weeks ago when we were at council last, and we found out that we used to have, I think it was 5 message boards, and now we have 3, or Councillor Neal just said we had 8, now we have 5. What happened to the message boards? Is it true that like they were actually stolen, or was it just that wherever the message board was, that area had been like renovated and the message board was taken down and just never put back up? What happened to those missing ones we once had?
Commissioner Boyce.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. No, we do not believe that the message boards were stolen. We believe that just as some work has been carried out over the years, that the message boards were just taken away without thought, and perhaps, you know, people didn't recognize the significance in the fact that that was actually they were noted in a bylaw. We think it was just a case of that. We don't believe that they were actually stolen. Thanks.
Great. Okay, thanks for that. And just to add to the history that Councillor Neal said, in 2010, message boards came back to council again because somebody put up a lost cat poster in McBurney Park, and they got a ticket for that lost cat poster being on a signpost, which is against the bylaw. No signs like that are supposed to go on infrastructure. And so that's when we expanded some of the message boards, the quantity of message boards that we had. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will call the vote on new motion number 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, new motion number 2, moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Holland. Whereas KFLNA has passed a motion supporting the decriminalization of drugs in an effort to reduce the high and current risk of overdose deaths. Whereas the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police have passed a similar motion. Whereas our neighboring municipality, the County of Lennox and Addington, has endorsed the KFLNA motion. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Kingston endorses the KFLNA motion to decriminalize the possession of drugs. Deputy Mayor Neal, you have the floor.
Thank you. And I think this is a really timely motion because the number of opioid-related deaths that are happening across the country, but particularly in areas of Ontario, I think is a tragedy that needs to be addressed. In countries such as Portugal and elsewhere where they've either totally legalized or at least decriminalized the use of drugs, there's been tremendous reduction of deaths due to that. So I think this is a timely motion and a motion that definitely would curb the risk and that people are faced with. So I hope that this passes. It was passed unanimously at KFLNA Public Health. And I would assume, and I don't, this was an oversight on my part, but this should be shared with both our MP, our MPP, and the federal and provincial governments. So I will talk to our clerks about that in the event that it passes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Bone.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I just wanted to clarify that there's a big difference between legalize and decriminalize. So when you're decriminalizing something, you want to make sure that the supports are in place to actually provide the needed supports for the people that need the help. So, I mean, simply decriminalizing something is not going to solve the problem. It needs to be money and finances in there far beyond what we as municipalities. So that requires the other levels of government to provide those resources as well. So I can support the decriminalization as long as it comes with the caveat that those other supports need to be built into the system. Because if not, we're not really, it's just lip service. We're not actually providing any help. Those other services are not things where they're not capital investments. It doesn't work that way. Operating costs. There's always going to be people that need that support. Those are systems that need to be built, and they're very complicated and convoluted, and those support systems need to be maintained to ensure that those people, some of these addictions and mental health crises that go along with addictions are lifelong things. So this is a much bigger conversation. I think this is a good first step, but I just wanted to point out that when people read this in the news, it's just a first step. There's a whole bunch of other factors that are at play here. So, you know, it's one of those things where it is important to have that higher conversation and to realize that this is just the beginning of a conversation. I know they've done it with success in other countries, especially a lot of Scandinavian countries, but those other support systems were put in place there in a wholesome environment to provide sort of almost like 360 degrees of care. So no matter where somebody turned, they got pointed towards the systems and the processes that could help them recover from whatever ailed them. So I just wanted to point that out to recognize that this is, there's a lot more to this, but the decriminalization can work, and it's totally different than just making it illegal to do it. So those are important things to keep in mind. With the wording in this particular motion, I can support.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. So I guess just to Councillor Bohm's point, which is a really good one, there's definitely an important distinction. Any form of legalization would be happening at the federal level, and so we're not heading in that direction with this. The reason that the decriminalization aspect is so important is because of the safety of individuals who are using drugs. And so, for example, we've heard both at public health and here at council from staff at the consumption treatment site at the integrated care hub about why it's so important that individuals who are using drugs are doing so with other people around to prevent those overdose deaths. So when the substances are, when there's a risk of arrest or further involvement with the justice system, individuals that then tend to do things more in private and would not necessarily be seeking the kinds of supports in the community if they felt that there was a risk of going to jail, essentially. But the important thing to keep in mind, I guess, also about decriminalization is that not from a public health perspective. I mean, I obviously, as a member of the Board of Health, I support this from the perspective of public health. But I think also in terms of public safety, there's a really good report that was circulated, and I think it maybe made its way to all of council, but I'm not certain. And it's the findings and recommendations. This came from our Chief of Police, Angie McNeely. So it's the decriminalization for simple possession of illicit drugs. And this report from last July from the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police outlines the fact that there are various levels of policing and enforcement, and the production and sale of these drugs would remain illegal even under a decriminalized regime. So therefore, anyone who's involved in drug trafficking or any sales of those substances would still be held to account for those activities, because certainly we do need to see a reduction in the drug trade and the criminal activity involved with it, which is very dangerous. So I do hope that people will support this from both the public health perspective, but also because our own Chief of Police and those across Canada recognize that it's really important to be directing frontline resources to diversion and to community supports that are available. And I agree with Councillor Bone that we don't have all of those supports. I don't think anywhere in Canada has them yet. We need a lot more funding to have the appropriate health and social services that would really help us over the longer term see a reduction in opioid use. Just one example of the drugs that are causing problems in the community. But it would be important, I think, to be able to send a message that that the public safety, both in terms of their health and also in terms of their the overall population, is best served with decriminalization. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with the previous speaker on all those points. And I do support the motion. I just think we should just so it's crystal clear, following Councillor Bohm's comments as well. So this be it resolved clause is very simple. It says the City of Kingston endorses the KFLNA motion to decriminalize the possession of drugs. It doesn't say decriminalization of trafficking of drugs. It doesn't say decriminalization of drugs. It says to decriminalize the possession of drugs. And I think that you really have to stress that point. As has been stated by other speakers, the possession of, when you criminalize the possession of drugs, you contribute to the harm that is done, and but you don't want to make it easier to traffic drugs, so you don't remove that piece. It's just the possession. And again, it's coming from the Board of Health. Everyone has glowing things to say about Dr. Moore. You know, he was there for this discussion at the board, and I know from my time, and which is now going on 5 years since I was on the Board of Health, we were talking about this then. So I know that the Board of Health, from a public health standpoint, it's pretty much what you would call a no-brainer nowadays, but it wasn't always the case. I think it's a little bit late in the game, really. I mean, the way things have gone, but better late than never. And I do support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all the speakers have made really good points. And it's true that this has to be done in a certain social service context and legal context to make this work. I just wanted to stress something about the experience in Portugal, which is often held up. And I did a little bit of research on that. The change is basically from a criminal approach to a medical health-based approach. I think everybody in council grasped that, but the positive effects are undeniable. The number of prisoners sentenced for drugs dropped from 40% to 15%, and the rates of drug use are below the EU average by a considerable amount. They're 25% of the EU average. So it's not a cure-all, it's not a silver bullet, but it's certainly a positive, constructive approach to things as a starting. And the prison profile changes. As we all know, numerous people are in jail or prison because of drug-related offenses, and certain ones will remain criminalized. But drug-related crime went down like nearly 16% apparently in 2019 in Portugal. So also what really impressed me was that the school age use has been dropping in Portugal for some years, since 2001 when they started this. And I think that's some importance to all of us, because it's when these things start, the sooner they start, the worse the situation can be. And the social costs have dropped by between 2001 and 2010 by 18%. So that's related to drug-related deaths, reduction in criminal proceedings, and the less occurrence of HIV and hepatitis rates. So this done properly, done well, as has been done in Portugal and has been tried in Oregon and in Norway and other places. Portugal was not the first, but it did a comprehensive approach. We could very well get something that is beneficial all around. The message, I think, to the public is this is not a free-for-all, right? You're not just going to decriminalize. First of all, it's the possession, not the other things, but other people and communities and neighborhoods will need to be protected when this happens, and the community in general. And so no one should think that this is just, all the rules are dropped, as Councillor Bohm pointed out. Other social services were needed, and Councillor Holland pointed out, the context that has to be in. So I can certainly support this, because the old way doesn't work. It's a mess. And this will be so much better if we do it properly. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So with that, then, yes, Deputy Mayor Neal.
Just very quickly, at Public Health, the whole rationale for this was risk management and harm prevention. And there are certain things, I mean, we supported the idea of a safe injection site a couple of years ago, and now the hub provides that service. we also have encouraged people using drugs on the street to have an opportunity to have it tested so that they know it's going to be safe. And none of this is a free-for-all. It's a management of what's recognized by the health community as alcoholism is, as drug addiction is. It's a health issue. And it's a health and safety issue that we need to address. And that's what this motion and public health's motion was striving to do. So I hope, as in public health, that this can pass unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will call the vote then on new motion number 2. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, we have if the clerk can recognize that was a unanimous vote. They're all kept track of, Councilor Young. Every vote we take. So noted. So we have no other new motions. Are there any notices of motion tonight? Okay, then Madam Deputy Clerk, I'll ask for minutes, please.
Moved by Councillor Doherty, seconded by Councillor McLaren, that the minutes of City Council meeting number 13-2021 held Tuesday, May 18th, 2021 be confirmed.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. We have some tabling of documents, a number of communications. Is there any other business? Madam Deputy Clerk, I'll ask for bylaws, please.
Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Hill, that bylaws 1 through 4 and 6 through 8 be given their first and second reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Hill, that clause 12.63 of bylaw number 2021-41 be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaws 1 to 3 readings.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Hill, that bylaws 1 through 8 be given their third reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, I will ask for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Bohm, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All those in favor? Opposed? And we're adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good night.